The wind howled through the canyons like a wounded animal, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust that had settled over the frontier for countless years. In the autumn of 1880, the land stretched endlessly beneath a sky that knew no mercy, scorching by day, bitter cold by night. This was Wyoming territory, where the law was as sparse as the rainfall, and a person's worth was measured by their ability to survive another sunrise. Martha Sullivan stood at the window of her weathered cabin, watching the moon cast long shadows across the barren landscape. At 26, she was already a widow. Her husband James lost to a mine collapse 2 winters past. The small wooden cross marking his grave was visible from her window, a constant reminder of how quickly the West could claim those who dared to challenge it. The townsfolk of Cedar Ridge, some 15 miles east, had little sympathy for her plight. A woman alone was an oddity, and disruption to the natural order of things. Some whispered she must be hiding something. Perhaps she'd driven her husband to his death with her sharp tongue, or maybe she entertained men in the dark of night. Martha knew these rumors, felt them like thorns whenever she made her monthly trip for supplies. The shopkeeper's wife would purse her lips, the men would stare too long, and the children would be pulled closer to their mother's skirts. But Martha endured. She had 40 acres of stubborn land, 6 chickens that barely laid, a milk cow named Buttercup, and enough pride to fill the Rio Grande. Her small vegetable garden fought against the alkaline soil. Her root cellar held preserves from better years, and her father's old Winchester hung loaded above the door. On this particular October night, the darkness seemed thicker than usual. Martha had finished her evening chores, securing the chicken coop against coyotes, checking on Buttercup in the lean-to barn, and banking the fire in her cast-iron stove. She was just settling down to mend a torn apron when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats. Irregular and urgent, her hand moved instinctively to the rifle. Visitors after dark meant trouble. The nearest neighbor was 8 miles away, and no one with good intentions traveled these roads beneath a new moon. The hoofbeats grew closer, then suddenly stopped. Martha held her breath, listening. A horse whinnied, a sound of distress. Then came a heavy thud, like a sack of grain hitting the ground. She waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. The night remained silent except for the wind rattling her shutters. Cautiously, Martha lifted the wooden bar from her door and peered out through the crack. In the pale starlight, she could make out a shape near her front gate, a horse, riderless, its reins dragging. And there, crumpled on the hard-packed earth, was the dark form of a man. Martha's first instinct was to bar the door again and wait for dawn. Let the coyotes or the cold claim him. It wasn't her concern. But as she watched, the figure stirred, attempting to rise before collapsing again. A low groan carried on the wind. She thought of James, dying alone in the darkness of a collapsed mine shaft. Had he called out? Had he hoped someone would come? Against every ounce of common sense, Martha took up the rifle and stepped into the night. The air was sharp enough to cut, and she pulled her shawl tighter as she approached the fallen man. His horse, a beautiful bay with a white blaze, snorted nervously, but didn't flee. The man lay face down, his dark coat spread around him like spilled ink. Martha used the rifle barrel to turn him over, then gasped. Even in the darkness, she could see the wet gleam of blood soaking through his shirt. His face was angular, weathered by sun and wind, with several days' worth of stubble. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. This was no lost traveler or drunk cowhand. She knew that face. Everyone in the territory knew it from the wanted posters. Jake McKenna, leader of the McKenna gang. They'd robbed the express office in Cheyenne last month, killed 2 guards. The reward on his head could buy her supplies for 5 years. Martha stood frozen, the rifle trembling in her hands. One shot, and she could drag his body to town, claim the reward, finally earn some respect. The good widow who brought down a notorious outlaw. They'd have to stop their whispers then. But as she raised the rifle, McKenna's eyes fluttered open. In the starlight, they were the color of winter sky, pale and desperate. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear. She leaned closer despite herself. "Ma." he whispered, his voice thick with pain. "Ma, I'm sorry." The rifle lowered without her conscious decision. Martha had seen death enough to recognize its approach. This man, this killer, this thief, was dying. The blood pooling beneath him was too much, too dark. He'd be gone by morning whether she acted or not. She could leave him here, go back inside, bar the door, and in the morning there'd be nothing but a corpse to deal with. It was the sensible thing, the safe thing. But Martha Sullivan had buried sensible along with her husband. "Lord, forgive me," she muttered, setting the rifle aside. The man was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath the blood-soaked clothes. Martha had to half-drag, half-carry him toward the cabin, his boots leaving furrows in the dirt. The horse followed, loyal even now. Inside, she deposited him on the rag rug before the fireplace. She wasn't about to ruin her one good quilt with his blood. By lamplight, the damage was clearer. A bullet wound in his left side, still seeping. Another graze along his ribs. His breathing was shallow, labored. Martha had tended injuries before. Mining accidents, horse kicks, the occasional knife fight. She fetched her medical supplies, such as they were: clean rags, a bottle of whiskey for cleaning wounds, a needle and thread for stitching. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away his shirt, cleaning the wounds, assessing the damage. The bullet had passed through. Thank God, no digging required. But the blood loss was significant, and infection was always a risk. As she worked, she noticed other scars, old ones, white against his sun-darkened skin. This man had been surviving violence for a long time. She stitched what she could, packed the wounds with clean cloth, and wrapped his torso with strips torn from an old bedsheet. Through it all, McKenna drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering incoherently, sometimes crying out. Once, he grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his eyes wide and unseeing. "Johnny," he gasped. "Where's Johnny? I couldn't get to him." "Hush now," Martha found herself saying, the same tone she'd used with James when fever took him. "Rest easy." By the time she finished, the eastern sky was showing the faintest hint of gray. Martha sat back on her heels, exhausted. Her hands were stained with blood. Her back ached, and she'd just harbored one of the most wanted men in the territory. She looked down at McKenna's face, slack in unconsciousness, without the harsh lines of pain. He looked younger, late 30s, maybe not so different from any of the ranch hands or miners she'd known, just a man who'd chosen a different path, a darker one. Martha rose stiffly and went to tend the horse. The bay was indeed a fine animal, well cared for despite the hard riding. She removed the saddle, expensive, with silver conchos, and noted the bedroll, the extra ammunition, the canvas bag that clinked with what was surely stolen money. She led the horse to the barn, gave it water and grain, then hid the saddle and belongings beneath loose hay in the loft. Back in the cabin, she barred the door and checked the windows. McKenna hadn't moved. His breathing was steadier now. The bleeding stopped. He might live. He might die. Either way, Martha had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She made herself coffee, strong and black, and sat in a rocking chair with the rifle across her lap. Outside, the sky lightened from black to purple to rose. Another dawn in the territory. Another day of survival. As the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains, Martha allowed herself one moment of bitter humor. The townspeople whispered that she entertained men in the night. Well, now she supposed they were right. After a fashion, though she doubted this was what they'd imagined. She watched the outlaw sleep and wondered what she'd done in saving his life. Had she damned her own? Time would tell. For now, she would wait and watch and keep her rifle close at hand. The West had taught her many things, but perhaps the most important was this. Sometimes the most dangerous choices were the ones that reminded you that you were still human, still capable of mercy in a merciless land. The cabin held the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Martha's home, modest as it was, bore the marks of a life carved from reluctant earth. Rough-hewn furniture her husband had made. Shelves lined with preserves she'd put up during better harvests. And windows covered with flour sack curtains she'd embroidered during long winter nights. The fireplace cast dancing shadows across the walls, its warmth fighting against the October chill that seeped through every crack and crevice. Martha hadn't moved from her chair in hours. The Winchester lay heavy across her lap, her fingers cramped from gripping it. She'd dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every pop from the fire, every settling of the old wood. The coffee had long since gone cold in her cup. Jake McKenna lay where she'd left him, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The bandages showed spots of red, but the bleeding had slowed. His color was better too, less like ash, more like a living man who might yet see another sunset. It was past midnight when he stirred. Martha straightened, her hand tightening on the rifle. His fingers twitched first, then his head turned slightly. A low groan escaped his lips. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they took in the unfamiliar ceiling. Martha watched him piece together his situation. She saw the moment of confusion give way to alertness, then wariness. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, searching for a gun that wasn't there. "Don't," Martha said quietly, but firmly. "You'll tear your stitches." McKenna's gaze snapped to her. Even wounded and flat on his back, there was something predatory in those pale eyes. They swept over her, the rifle, the room, calculating odds and options in seconds. "Where am I?" His voice was rough as sandpaper. "My home." Martha kept her tone neutral. "You collapsed outside my door." He tried to sit up, grimaced, and fell back. "My horse, in the barn, fed and watered." A flicker of surprise crossed his features. "You know who I am." It wasn't a question. Martha nodded. "Everyone within 200 miles knows who you are. Mr. McKenna." "Then why?" He coughed, wincing at the movement. "Why didn't you put a bullet in me and collect the reward?" Martha found herself without an easy answer. She rose from the chair, keeping the rifle pointed in his general direction but not directly at him. "Are you hungry?" He stared at her as if she'd spoken Chinese. "What?" "Hungry. You've lost blood. You need food." "Lady, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly." Martha moved to the stove, her back straight. "You're Jake McKenna. You've robbed and killed your way across 3 territories. There's $5,000 on your head. Dead or alive. That about sum it up." She heard him shift on the floor behind her. "Then why am I breathing?" Martha ladled stew from the pot she'd kept warm, rabbit and wild onions, with the last of her potatoes. She'd been saving it for the week, but a dying man needed it more than her plans did. "Can't say I rightly know," she admitted, filling a bowl. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. She turned back to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Suspicion, certainly. Confusion, maybe. Something else that might have been wonder. "I could kill you," he said matter-of-factly. "Take what I need and disappear." Martha set the bowl on the small table beside him, then retreated to her chair. "You could try, but you can barely lift your head, and I'm a fair shot." "My husband made sure of that before he died." McKenna's eyes flicked to the window, probably noting the grave marker visible in the moonlight. "How long?" 2 years come December. Mining accident. Cave-in. Martha was surprised by the question, by the hint of something almost like sympathy in his voice. "You should eat before it gets cold." He struggled to prop himself up on one elbow, pride warring with practicality. Martha watched him fight for every inch, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort. Finally, she sighed and set the rifle aside, moving to help him sit up against the wall. He tensed at her approach, but allowed her to support him. This close, she could smell the trail on him, leather and gunpowder, blood and dust. His skin was fever-warm through the bandages. "There," she said, stepping back quickly. "Can you manage?" McKenna took the bowl with hands that trembled slightly. The first spoonful seemed to surprise him. "This is good." "Don't sound so shocked." Just because I live alone doesn't mean I can't cook. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. Fair enough. They sat in strange companionship, him eating slowly, her watching from her chair. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the shutters. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. That's my mother's recipe. Martha found herself saying, "The stew. She taught me before we came west." "Where from?" "Ohio. Father thought he'd find gold in California. Found an early grave instead." McKenna nodded slowly. "The West has a way of taking payment from everybody, one way or another." "That include you?" His spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Especially me." Martha studied him. Without the wanted poster's harsh sketch, he was just a man. Weathered and scarred. Yes, dangerous, certainly, but human underneath it all. "Who's Johnny?" she asked suddenly. The bowl nearly slipped from his hands. His face went hard, closed off like a slammed door. "What?" "You called for him, while I was tending your wounds." McKenna set the bowl aside carefully, his jaw tight. "Nobody, fever talk." Martha knew a lie when she heard one, but didn't press. Everyone had ghosts out here. Some just carried more than others. "I should go," he said abruptly. "Soon as I can ride." "You try to ride now, you'll be dead before you reach the valley." "That's my problem, not yours. It becomes mine if you die on my land. Sheriff's already got enough reasons to make my life difficult." McKenna's eyes sharpened. "Sheriff Waters giving you trouble?" Martha was surprised he knew the sheriff's name, then chided herself. Of course he'd know the lawmen in the area. His survival depended on it. No more than usual. A woman alone is an easy target for assumptions. "Waters is a hypocrite and a fool," McKenna said flatly. "Takes bribes from the cattle barons, then plays righteous on Sunday. You'd know about taking things that don't belong to you." He actually chuckled at that, though it turned into a cough. "True enough, but at least I'm honest about what I am." Martha retrieved the empty bowl, acutely aware of him watching her every move. At the stove, she poured water from the kettle into a cup, adding a precious few leaves of tea. "Why'd you stay?" McKenna asked suddenly. "After your husband died, why not go back east?" "Go back to what?" Martha turned, cup in hand. "To being someone's charity case? To sewing in a factory until my eyes give out?" She shook her head. "This is my land. I earned it with sweat and tears. I won't give it up just because it's hard." She brought him the tea, noticed how carefully he took it, making sure their fingers didn't touch. "You're either the bravest woman I've met or the most foolish," he said. "Probably both." Martha returned to her chair. "What about you? What made Jake McKenna decide robbing stages was better than honest work?" His face darkened. "You ever been hungry? Really hungry? The kind where your stomach stops hurting because it's given up hoping?" Martha nodded slowly. The first winter after James died. She'd known that hunger intimately. "I was 12 when my father died. Lung fever from working in the coal mines. Mother took in washing, but it wasn't enough. Not with 4 young ones to feed." McKenna stared into the teacup. "I started stealing. Food at first, then whatever I could sell. Got caught when I was 15. Spent 2 years on a chain gang. When I got out, well, seemed like I'd already chosen my path." "There's always a choice," Martha said softly. "Is there?" His laugh was bitter. "Tell that to the kid whose brother starved to death because he couldn't steal enough bread. Tell that to—" He broke off, jaw clenched. "Johnny was your brother." It wasn't a question. McKenna's knuckles went white around the cup. "He was 8, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sweetest kid you ever saw, always smiling, even when his belly was empty. I tried so hard to take care of them all. But that winter," he shook his head, "that winter was brutal." Martha felt her heart twist. She judged him as a killer, a thief. She hadn't considered the boy he'd been, the choices poverty forced on people. "The others?" she asked gently. "Sisters made it, both married now, living respectable lives back east." They think I'm dead. Better that way." They sat in silence as the fire burned lower. Martha rose to add another log, her mind churning. This man, this outlaw, wasn't what she'd expected. The wanted posters painted him as a monster. But monsters didn't grieve for lost brothers or ensure their sisters lived respectable lives. "You should rest," she said finally. "I'll keep watch." McKenna studied her for a long moment. "I could give you some of the money. From the robbery. For your trouble." "Blood money? No, thank you. It's just money." "Doesn't care where it came from." "I care." Martha picked up the rifle again. "Now rest. You're no good to anyone dead." He settled back against the wall, exhaustion clear in every line of his body, but his eyes remained on her, wary and wondering in equal measure. "Martha Sullivan," he said suddenly. "That's your name. Saw it on the mail at the general store once." She stiffened. The thought of him watching, knowing who she was before tonight, sent a chill down her spine. "Don't look like that," he said. "I make it my business to know who lives where. It's how I stay alive. But I never would have come here, brought trouble to your door. This wasn't planned." "I know," Martha said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "You were running from something. What happened?" "Ambush. Someone sold us out, lost 2 good men, and the rest scattered." His voice hardened. "When I find out who, maybe it's a sign. Time to find a different path. Too late for that. Man makes his choices. Then his choices make him." Martha thought about that as the night deepened around them. About choices and consequences, mercy and judgment. About the thin line between surviving and living. Outside. The wind picked up, howling through the canyon like a lost soul. But inside the cabin, for this one night at least, 2 damaged people found themselves on the same side of the wall, keeping the darkness at bay together. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Wyoming territory, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Martha had dozed in her chair, the rifle still across her lap, jerking awake when the rooster crowed. Jake McKenna lay where she'd left him, but his color was better, his breathing deeper and more regular. She rose stiffly, joints protesting the night spent in the chair. First things first, the animals needed tending. She glanced at McKenna, decided he was in no condition to cause trouble, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The rumors had already started. She knew. 3 days ago in town, she'd overheard Frank Morrison telling anyone who'd listen about the stagecoach robbery. 6 men had hit the coach carrying the mine payroll. 2 guards dead, driver wounded. The McKenna gang, they said, though only 5 men had ridden away. Martha fed the chickens, milked Buttercup, and checked on McKenna's horse. The bay nickered softly, seeming glad to see her. She ran her hand along its neck, feeling the quality of the animal. This was no common horse thief's mount. Back inside, she found McKenna attempting to sit up straighter. "Easy," she warned. "Those stitches won't hold if you're foolish. Need to check the wounds," he managed through gritted teeth. Martha set down the milk pail. "I'll do it. You'll only make things worse." He submitted to her ministrations with ill grace, jaw tight as she unwrapped the bandages. The wounds looked better than she'd hoped. No red streaks of infection, no putrid smell. She cleaned them again with whiskey, noting how he didn't flinch despite what must be considerable pain. "You've done this before," he observed. "Mining town. Someone always needed patching up." She began rewrapping the wounds with fresh cloth. "These are healing well. You're lucky." "Lucky." He gave a short laugh. "That's one word for it." As she worked, Martha became aware of his scrutiny, not the leering look she got in town, but something more thoughtful, almost puzzled. "What?" she asked finally. "Trying to figure you out. Martha Sullivan. Not much to figure. I'm just trying to survive. Same as everyone." "No." He shook his head slightly. "That's not it. You could have let me die. Could have shot me yourself. Hell, you should have. But here you are, playing nursemaid to a man who's brought nothing but trouble." Martha tied off the bandage, sitting back on her heels. "Maybe I'm tired of death, seen too much of it already." Before he could respond, the sound of horses carried through the morning air. Multiple horses, moving fast. Martha's blood ran cold. "Get in the root cellar," she hissed. "Already moving. Now!" McKenna struggled to his feet, face pale with the effort. Martha grabbed his arm, half supporting, half dragging him to the cellar entrance hidden beneath a braided rug. She yanked it open, revealing wooden steps descending into darkness. "Your boots," she said urgently. "They'll see the blood." Together they managed to get him down the steps. Martha threw his boots after him, then grabbed a blanket. "Stay quiet, no matter what you hear." She dropped the door, kicked the rug back in place, and quickly wiped up the spots of blood with the blanket. The hoofbeats were closer now. Martha shoved the blanket in the stove, grabbed her shawl, and stepped out onto the porch just as 6 riders crested the rise. Sheriff Waters led them, his badge glinting in the morning sun. He was a big man gone to fat, with cold eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently twisted in disapproval. The others she recognized, deputies and townsmen who fancied themselves a posse. Mrs. Sullivan. Waters touched his hat brim mockingly. "Early morning visit, I'm afraid." "Sheriff." Martha kept her voice steady. "What brings you out this way?" "Looking for a fugitive, Jake McKenna. You heard of him?" "Everyone's heard of him. He was seen heading this direction after the robbery. Horse was wounded. Man might be too." Waters' eyes swept over her property, lingering on the barn. "You see anything unusual?" "Nothing but coyotes and tumbleweeds. Same as always." One of the deputies, a young man named Tom Garrett, dismounted without asking. "Mind if we look around, ma'am?" "I do mind, as a matter of fact." Martha straightened her spine. "You have no cause to search my property." Waters' face darkened. A woman living alone, no protection, dangerous man on the loose. "Some might say we're doing you a favor. Some might say you're trespassing. Now, see here." "No, you see here." Martha's temper flared. "My husband died working an honest living. I've kept this place going alone, bothering nobody, asking for nothing. I pay my taxes, such as they are. Unless you have legal cause to search my property, I'll ask you to leave." The men exchanged glances. Waters' jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "Tom, check the barn." "Sheriff, she said—" "I heard what she said. Check the barn." Martha stood rigid as Tom headed for the barn, praying McKenna's horse would stay calm. The young deputy disappeared inside, emerged a few minutes later. "Just her cow and some chickens," he reported. "Nothing else." Waters wasn't satisfied. His piggy eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't be hiding something? Would you, Mrs. Sullivan? Wouldn't be the first time a woman fell for an outlaw's charms." Heat flooded Martha's cheeks. "How dare you?" "Just saying, lonely widow, handsome desperado." Waters shrugged. "These things happen. Get off my land." Martha's voice was low, dangerous. "Now. Or what? You'll shoot us?" Waters laughed, an ugly sound. "Bob, check the house." Bob Henley, a man Martha had once bought eggs from, looked uncomfortable. "Sheriff, we can't just—" "Do it!" Martha stepped in front of the door. "You'll need to go through me first." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. 6 armed men against 1 woman. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the yard. It was Tom Garrett who broke the standoff. "Sheriff, if McKenna was here, he'd have shot us by now. Man's not known for running from a fight." Waters considered this, his face mottled with anger and frustration. "Finally." He spat in the dirt near Martha's feet. "Maybe not, but I'll be watching. Mrs. Sullivan. 1 slip, 1 sign you're harboring fugitives, and I'll be back with a warrant." "You do that," Martha said coldly, "and I'll be writing to the territorial governor about harassment of law-abiding citizens." The threat of involving higher authorities made Waters pause. Everyone knew the governor was looking for excuse to clean up corruption in the territory. Waters jerked his horse around. "Mount up," he barked. "We're wasting time here." The posse rode off. dust clouds marking their departure. Martha stayed on the porch until they were specks in the distance, then sagged against the doorframe. Her hands shook as the fear she'd held at bay crashed over her. She waited another 10 minutes before retrieving McKenna from the cellar. He emerged slowly, painfully, his face gray with effort and pain. "You should have given me up," he said as she helped him back to his makeshift bed by the fire. "And proved them right, that I'm just another foolish woman who can't be trusted." Martha shook her head. "I'd rather face hanging than give Waters the satisfaction." McKenna studied her with those pale eyes. "He'll be back. I know. This isn't your fight. It became mine the moment I dragged you through that door." Martha busied herself making coffee, needing something to do with her trembling hands. "Besides, Waters has been looking for an excuse to drive me off this land. Seems the banker in town thinks it would make a nice addition to his holdings." "Ah," McKenna nodded slowly. "So that's how it is. That's how it's always been. The rich want what little the poor have scraped together." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. "At least you're honest about your thievery." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I could help you." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Help? You can barely stand." "I mean when I'm healed." He shifted, wincing. "My gang, what's left of it, we could make things difficult for your banker friend. For Waters, too. And in return, shelter, just until I'm strong enough to ride." Martha sipped her coffee, considering harboring an outlaw was madness. But then, her life had been edging toward disaster since James died. Maybe madness was what she needed. "There are rules," she said finally. "You don't bring trouble here. No gang members, no meetings, nothing that puts a target on this place." "Agreed. You help with chores as you're able. I won't nurse a man who won't work." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Fair enough. And when you go, you go. No coming back, no sending messages. Clean break." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment. But he nodded. "Understood." They shook on it, his hand warm and calloused in hers. Martha tried not to think about what she'd just agreed to, what lines she'd crossed. Outside, the day warmed, dust devils dancing across the yard. Inside, an unlikely alliance was forming, a widow fighting to keep her land and an outlaw running from his past. Neither knew where it would lead, but for now, they had common cause. That evening, as Martha prepared a simple meal, McKenna spoke from his place by the fire. "Why didn't you remarry? After your husband died?" Martha's hands stilled on the potatoes she was peeling. "Who says I didn't try? But the only offers I got came with conditions. Give up the land, move to town, become someone's kept woman." She resumed peeling with sharp, angry strokes. "I buried my husband on this land. I won't abandon it or him for convenience. Most would say that's foolish. Most haven't lost everything they loved." She glanced at him. "Have they?" McKenna was quiet, staring into the flames. "No," he said softly. "Most haven't." They ate in companionable silence. 2 souls who understood loss, sheltering together against a world that would destroy them separately. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, they had food, warmth, and the strange comfort of not being alone. As darkness fell over the territory, Martha thought about the threads that connected people, choice and circumstance, mercy and need. She'd made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences, whatever they might be. 3 nights had passed since Sheriff Waters' visit, and an uneasy routine had settled over the small homestead. Jake McKenna was healing faster than Martha had expected, already able to move about the cabin without assistance, though she noticed how he favored his left side and how his face would tighten with pain when he thought she wasn't looking. The moon hung low and full over the valley, casting everything in silver light. Martha had finished her evening chores and sat darning socks by lamplight while McKenna cleaned his revolvers at the table. She'd returned them to him that morning, recognizing the futility of keeping an armed man disarmed when trust was all that stood between them. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, not looking up from his work. "Thinking," Martha replied, her needle flashing in the light. Dangerous habit in a woman, he said, but there was a teasing note in his voice she'd started to recognize. More dangerous in an outlaw, she countered. He chuckled, a sound she was hearing more often. It transformed his face, easing the hard lines carved by years of running. Fair point. The comfortable silence was shattered by hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching fast. Martha's blood turned to ice. It was too late for social calls, too deliberate for passing travelers. McKenna was already on his feet, strapping on his gun belt with practiced efficiency. How many? Martha peered through the window. 8, maybe 9, coming from the north. That's not Waters. He'd come from town, from the east. McKenna's face had gone hard. Professional. Get the rifle. The cellar. No time. And I won't hide while you face danger I brought. He positioned himself by the window, checking his ammunition. These might be my men, or they might be the ones who sold us out. The riders thundered into the yard, horses lathered with sweat. Martha recognized none of them. They wore long dusters and had the hard look of men who lived outside the law. One dismounted, a lean man with a silver threading through his dark beard. Jake McKenna, he called out. We know you're in there. Saw your horse's tracks days ago. That bay of yours leaves a distinctive mark. McKenna cursed under his breath. Ben Torres? Should have known. Who is he? Martha whispered. Used to ride with us. Left 6 months ago to form his own gang. McKenna's jaw tightened. Guess now I know who sold us out to the law. Come on out, Jake. Torres continued. We got no quarrel with the woman. Just want to talk about that payroll money. Way I figure it. My information made that job possible. I deserve a bigger cut. Your information got 2 good men killed. McKenna called back. Only thing you deserve is a bullet. Torres laughed. Now, that's not very charitable. Tell you what, give us the money, and we ride away. Nobody has to die tonight. Martha felt McKenna tense beside her. She knew he was calculating odds, angles, possibilities. 9 men in the open versus 2 defenders with good cover. Not impossible, but not good either. I've got another offer, McKenna said. You turn around and ride away, and I don't hunt down every last one of you like the dogs you are. Big talk for a man hiding behind a woman's skirts. The insult hung in the air. Martha saw McKenna's knuckles whiten on his gun. Wait, she whispered urgently. I have an idea. Before he could stop her, Martha opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. The moonlight caught her hair, turning it to silver. Gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. This is my property you're trespassing on. Torres turned his attention to her, a smile playing at his lips. Ma'am, no disrespect intended. We're just here to collect what's ours. Nothing here belongs to you, Martha said firmly. And I'll thank you to state your business and leave. Our business is with McKenna. Mister, McKenna is my hired hand. Has been for the better part of a week. Whatever grievance you have with him from before doesn't concern me. Torres laughed outright at that. Hired hand, Jake McKenna. Lady, do you think we're stupid? I think you're trespassing, Martha repeated. And in the territory, a landowner has the right to defend their property. Against one woman. Torres's voice dripped condescension. Martha raised the rifle smoothly, sighting down the barrel. My husband taught me to shoot jackrabbits at 100 yards in poor light. A man makes a much bigger target. The tension ratcheted up. Several of Torres's men shifted nervously in their saddles. They'd expected to intimidate a frightened woman, not face down a steady rifle. Now, Torres said slowly, no need for unpleasantness, but we know McKenna's in there, and we know he's got that payroll money. We're not leaving without it. Then you're not leaving, Martha said simply. A window shattered. McKenna's gun barked twice in rapid succession. One of Torres's men cried out, clutching his shoulder. Another's hat went flying. Next ones won't be warnings, McKenna called out. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Martha kept her rifle trained on Torres, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She could feel McKenna's presence behind her, knew he had her back. Then she heard it, more hoofbeats approaching from the south. Everyone tensed. "That'll be the Thornton boys," Martha said loudly. "My neighbors. They must have heard the commotion. Good men, all 5 of them. Don't take kindly to strangers threatening their own." It was a bluff. The Thorntons lived 8 miles away and numbered only 3. But Torres didn't know that. His men were already spooked, 1 wounded. Facing defenders with good cover and possible reinforcements coming. "This isn't over, McKenna," Torres snarled. "You can't hide behind her forever." "I'm not hiding." McKenna stepped onto the porch beside Martha, guns drawn. "You want to settle this? We settle it, but not here, not on her land." Torres considered this. "Tomorrow night, Miller's Canyon. You know the place." "I know it. Come alone. You first." Torres wheeled his horse around. "Let's ride." He commanded his men. They thundered off into the night, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Martha lowered the rifle, her arms suddenly trembling. McKenna's hand touched her shoulder, warm and steady. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said softly. "Probably both." She turned to face him, found him closer than expected. "Will you go tomorrow night?" "I have to. He won't stop otherwise." His pale eyes searched hers. "But that was some bluff about the Thorntons. How did you—" Your voice changed, just slightly. "But I've made my living reading people." His hand was still on her shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For standing with me. Not many would." Martha was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from him, the way the moonlight caught the planes of his face. "We have an agreement. You're my hired hand, remember?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "Right, your hired hand." They stood there a moment longer, something unspoken hanging between them. Then McKenna stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should check the perimeter, make sure they're really gone." Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him move off into the darkness, sure-footed despite his injury. When had she stopped seeing him as a threat? When had he become someone she trusted to guard her back? She went inside, sweeping up the broken glass from the window. Her hands shook now that the immediate danger had passed. Torres would be back. She knew. Men like that didn't forget slights. McKenna returned an hour later, face grim. "They're gone, but they'll have men watching the roads now." "What will you do?" He sat heavily at the table. "Meet him tomorrow night. Try to end this. It's a trap." "Probably." He ran a hand through his hair. "But I can't keep bringing trouble to your door. You don't deserve that." Martha poured 2 cups of whiskey from her medicinal bottle and sat across from him. "Tell me about Torres. Why did he leave your gang?" McKenna was quiet for a long moment. "He wanted to hit a bank in Cheyenne, one where families kept their savings. I said no. We rob from those who can afford it, not from folks scraping by. He didn't like that." He took a sip of whiskey. "Said I was going soft. Were you?" "Maybe." He stared into his cup. "Been thinking lately about Johnny. What he'd think of how I turned out. If he'd be proud or ashamed." "He was 8, Martha said gently. "He'd have loved you regardless. You don't know that. I know you still carry him with you. That says something about the man you are underneath it all." McKenna looked at her then, really looked at her, and Martha felt exposed, seen in a way she hadn't been since James died. "You're dangerous. Martha Sullivan." "How so?" "You make a man think about things better left buried." He drained his cup and stood. "I should prepare for tomorrow." But he paused at the doorway to the lean-to room where he'd been sleeping. "Martha, if something happens tomorrow, nothing will happen." She interrupted. "You'll be careful. You'll come back." He smiled sadly. "You sound very sure." "I am." She met his gaze steadily. "You're my hired hand, remember? I haven't given you permission to get yourself killed." "Yes, ma'am." He gave a mock salute, but his eyes were serious. "Lock the door behind me tomorrow." Keep the rifle close. If I'm not back by dawn, you will be." He nodded and disappeared into the darkness of the other room. Martha sat alone by the dying fire, wondering when she'd started caring what happened to Jake McKenna, wondering if he'd noticed the fear in her voice when she'd said he'd come back. Outside, clouds scudded across the moon, and the wind whispered secrets through the canyon. Tomorrow would bring violence and possibly death, but tonight she'd stood shoulder to shoulder with an outlaw and faced down 9 armed men. Tonight, she'd felt alive in a way she hadn't since James died. She touched her shoulder where his hand had rested, still feeling the warmth. Yes, Jake McKenna was dangerous, but perhaps not in the way she'd first thought. He was dangerous because he made her remember she was more than just a widow trying to survive. He made her remember she was a woman with courage, with heart, with choices yet to make. Tomorrow he would ride into almost certain death, and she would wait, rifle in hand, for him to come back, because somewhere between midnight mercy and drawn guns, they'd become something more than strangers, something more than widow and outlaw, something that might be worth fighting for. The first light of dawn crept across the Wyoming sky like spilled honey, painting the clouds in shades of amber and rose. Martha stood at the window, watching the sun climb above the distant mountains. She hadn't slept. How could she? When Jake McKenna had ridden off to Miller's Canyon just after midnight, his jaws set with grim determination, she'd insisted on checking his weapons, tightening the bandages one last time. He'd submitted to her ministrations with unusual patience, his eyes following her every movement. "You don't have to go," she'd said, knowing it was useless. "Yes, I do." He'd caught her hand as she adjusted his gun belt. "But I meant what I said. Lock the door. Keep the rifle close." Now, hours later, she tried to focus on morning chores. The cow needed milking, the chickens needed feeding, but her hands trembled as she worked. Every sound made her heart leap. Was that hoofbeats? Was he coming back? The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the yard. No dust cloud on the horizon. No rider approaching. Martha's dread grew with each passing hour. She was drawing water from the well when she saw him. Jake McKenna sat slumped in his saddle, the bay horse walking slowly up the trail. Even from a distance, she could see something was wrong. He swayed with each step the horse took. One hand pressed to his side. Martha dropped the bucket and ran. She reached him just as he started to slide from the saddle, managing to break his fall. Fresh blood soaked through his shirt, not from the old wounds, but from a new one along his ribs. "Thornton Place," he mumbled. "Said they were neighbors. Hush." Martha struggled to support his weight. "Let's get you inside." Somehow she managed it, though her back screamed in protest. She deposited him in the chair by the fireplace, then barred the door with shaking hands. "What happened?" She cut away his shirt, gasping at the bullet graze along his ribs. An inch deeper and it would have been fatal. "Ambush," he gritted out. "Should have known. Too many men. But you're here. You made it back. Barely." He caught her wrist as she reached for the whiskey bottle. "Martha, need to tell you something. Later, after I—" "No, now." His grip was surprisingly strong. "Torres is dead, but his men, they'll come. You need to leave." "I'm not going anywhere." She pulled free, dousing a cloth with whiskey. "Now hold still. This is going to hurt." He hissed through his teeth as she cleaned the wound. It was long but shallow, bleeding freely but not dangerously. She worked in silence, aware of his eyes on her face. "Why?" he asked suddenly. "Why what?" "Why aren't you running? Any sensible woman would be heading for town right now, getting as far from me as possible." Martha paused in her work. Why indeed? She thought of the empty nights before he'd arrived, the crushing loneliness, the weight of surviving alone. She thought of these past days, the danger, yes, but also the conversation, the companionship, the feeling of being truly seen again. "I'm tired of running," she said finally. "Tired of being afraid, tired of just existing." She resumed cleaning the wound. Besides, you're my hired hand. Says so right in our agreement." A laugh escaped him, then turned into a groan. "Stubborn woman. So I've been told." She bandaged the wound carefully, then sat back to assess her work. That's when she noticed how he was looking at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I was wrong," he said softly. "That first night, when I said you were either brave or foolish. You're neither." "Oh?" "You're magnificent." The word hung between them like a physical thing. Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're delirious. Loss of blood." "No." He sat up straighter, wincing. "I need to say this. Before whatever comes next." He took a breath. "Martha Sullivan, you saved my life. Not just by tending my wounds, but by reminding me there's still good in this world. Still people worth protecting. Jake, let me finish." His eyes held hers. "Where I come from, when a woman saves a man's life, he owes her everything. His loyalty, his protection, his..." He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "In the old ways, the ways my grandmother taught me, it means more than that." Martha's heart was beating so loud she was sure he could hear it. "What does it mean?" He stood slowly, one hand braced on the chair. The morning light streaming through the window caught his face, highlighting the strong planes, the determined set of his jaw. "She spared the raider's life at midnight," he said, his voice low and intense. "By sunrise, he called her his bride." The words seemed to echo in the small cabin. Martha stared at him, unable to speak. "I know I have no right," he continued. "I'm an outlaw, a man with blood on his hands and prices on his head, but Martha, you've become everything to me. Not just because you saved me, but because of who you are. Strong and gentle, fierce and kind. You face down 9 armed men without flinching, then worry about my wounds like..." His voice roughened, "like someone who cares." "I do care," Martha whispered. "Then marry me." The words dropped like stones into still water, sending ripples through the morning air. Martha's knees felt weak. "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his pale eyes. "I know it's madness. I know I'm asking you to tie yourself to a hunted man. But I also know that I love you, Martha Sullivan. Have since that second night, when you told me about your husband, and I saw the strength it took to keep going alone. Jake." Martha's voice broke. "You don't even know me." "Not really. I know enough." His hand came up to cup her cheek, gentle despite the calluses. "I know you work from dawn to dusk without complaint. I know you face down sheriffs and outlaws alike to protect what's yours. I know you see me, not just the outlaw, but the man underneath. Do you know how rare that is?" Martha leaned into his touch despite herself. When had she last felt cherished? When had anyone looked at her with such fierce devotion? "What kind of life could you offer me?" she asked. "Always running, always looking over our shoulders." "No." His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "I'm done running. Done with that life. These past days with you, they've shown me what I've been missing, what I want." His eyes searched hers. "I want mornings watching you make coffee, evenings by the fire, a life where the most dangerous thing I do is break a wild horse or face down a stubborn cow. You're dreaming, maybe, but isn't it a dream worth having?" He leaned closer. "I've got money hidden away, enough to buy passage somewhere they don't know my face. California, maybe Oregon. We could start over, build something real." Martha's heart was racing. It was insane, impossible. And yet, what about your men, your obligations? Dead or scattered, the gang's finished. His expression hardened briefly. "Torres made sure of that. There's nothing holding me to that life anymore. Nothing but habit and pride, and those are poor companions compared to..." He gestured between them. "This..." Martha pulled away, needing space to think. She walked to the window, staring out at the land she'd fought so hard to keep, the grave marker on the hill, the life she'd built from stubbornness and grief. I buried my husband on this land, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to forget him. I'm asking you to live again. She turned to find he'd followed her, standing close but not touching. The morning light made him look younger, almost vulnerable. You barely know me, she repeated. Then teach me. His voice was soft, persuasive. Show me who Martha Sullivan is when she's not just surviving. Let me learn the sound of your laugh, the things that make you smile. Let me earn the right to call you wife. And if I say no, pain flashed across his features, quickly hidden. Then I'll ride away, disappear. Make sure my troubles never darken your door again. I don't want that, Martha said quickly, surprising herself with the vehemence. Then what do you want? Martha looked at him, really looked. Saw the hope in his eyes, the fear, the longing. Saw a man who'd spent half his life running, now standing still for her. Saw someone who looked at her not with pity for the widow, not with calculation for the land, but with genuine love. She took a shaky breath. I want to not be alone anymore. I want someone who sees me as more than poor Martha Sullivan. Her voice broke. I want to feel alive again. Then say yes. He reached for her hands, holding them gently. Say yes, and I'll spend whatever time I have left proving you made the right choice. Say yes, and let me turn this lonely exile into a home. Martha looked down at their joined hands. His were scarred, weathered, the hands of a man who'd lived hard, but they held hers like she was something precious. You're talking about giving up everything, she said. Your freedom, your way of life. My freedom? He laughed, short and sharp. Martha, I've been in a prison of my own making for 20 years. You're not taking my freedom, you're offering it. The law will always be a threat, I won't lie about that. But with you beside me, I could face down every sheriff in the territory. Martha felt tears prick her eyes. When had she last cried? When had she last wanted something this much? This is madness, she whispered. The best things usually are. She looked up at him, saw her own hope reflected in his eyes, thought about chances not taken, roads not traveled, thought about James, who'd want her to live, not just exist. Yes, she breathed. Jake's whole body stilled. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Jake McKenna. God help us both. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after a long night. He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. Martha buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of leather and gunpowder and something uniquely him. When? He asked against her hair. Soon, before I come to my senses. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. There's a traveling preacher comes through Miller's Ranch first Sunday of every month. That's 6 days from now. 6 days. Martha pulled back to look at him. What do we do until then? We survive, Jake said simply. Together. And then we start living. As if in answer to his words. Hoofbeats sounded in the distance. They both tensed, but it was just a single rider, moving slow. Jake reached for his gun, then stopped as the rider came into view. It was Tom Garrett, the young deputy, and he was alone. Tom Garrett rode into the yard slowly, hands visible, making no sudden movements. Martha and Jake watched from the window as the young deputy dismounted and approached the cabin with measured steps. That's close enough. Tom, Martha called through the door. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm alone. Just need to talk. His voice carried a note of urgency. It's important. Jake moved to the side window, gun drawn, checking for other riders. He shook his head. Tom appeared to be truly alone. Martha unbarred the door but kept the rifle ready. State your business. Tom removed his hat, looking younger than his 20-odd years. Ma'am, there's trouble coming. Thought you should know. What kind of trouble? The deputy glanced around nervously. Sheriff Waters is gathering a posse, a big one. Word's out about what happened at Miller's Canyon last night, about Torres and his men being shot up. Self-defense, Jake said from behind Martha. Tom's eyes widened slightly at seeing McKenna, but he nodded. I figured as much, but Waters doesn't care. He's using it as an excuse. Says you're harboring a killer, Mrs. Sullivan. Says he's going to clean out this nest of outlaws once and for all. When? Martha asked, her stomach dropping. Tomorrow. Maybe day after. He's waiting for more men from Cheyenne. Tom twisted his hat in his hands. Ma'am, my mother knew your husband. Said James Sullivan was a good man. I remember when you first came here, how happy you both were. He swallowed hard. You don't deserve what Waters is planning. Which is? Tom looked directly at Jake. He's not planning to arrest anyone. Said accidents happen when dealing with desperate outlaws. Said maybe the widow gets caught in crossfire. Martha felt Jake tense beside her. His voice, when he spoke, was deadly quiet. Waters wants the land. Him and Mr. Hutchins at the bank. Tom confirmed. Been planning it for months. Your situation just gives them the excuse they need. Why are you telling us this? Jake asked suspiciously. Tom straightened his shoulders. Because it ain't right. Because my mother raised me better. Because... He looked at Martha. Because you stood up to Waters when he wanted to search without cause. Not many would have done that. Martha lowered the rifle slightly. What do you suggest we do? Leave, tonight. Take what you can carry and go. This is my home, Martha said fiercely. My husband is buried here. Better to leave it than be buried beside him, Tom said gently. Please, Mrs. Sullivan. Waters has 20 men, maybe more. He's not looking for justice. He's looking for an execution. Jake moved closer to Martha. The boy's right. We should go. Where? Martha's voice cracked. Where do we go? How far do we run? Tom cleared his throat. There's a freight wagon heading west tomorrow morning. Driver's a friend. He'd take passengers, no questions asked. Could get you as far as Denver. And then you disappear. Become different people. Live. Martha felt tears threatening. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, gone. But she looked at Jake, saw the same pain in his eyes. He understood what this land meant to her. There's another way, Jake said slowly. Tom, you said Waters is gathering men from Cheyenne. Yes, sir. How many are with him now? Maybe 8, 10. The rest won't arrive until tomorrow night. Jake's eyes took on a calculating look. And if Waters were to have an accident, before the others arrived? Tom paled. I can't be part of killing a lawman. Not killing, Jake said. But if evidence were to surface about his dealings with Hutchins, about the bribes, the land grabs. You have evidence? I could get it. Man like Waters always keeps records, insurance against his partners. Jake looked at Martha. One night. Give me one night in town, and I'll find what we need. It's suicide, Martha protested. You'll be walking into a trap. Maybe, but it's better than running. Better than letting them take what's yours. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Even with evidence, you'd need someone in authority to act on it. Waters has the local judge in his pocket. What about the federal marshal in Laramie? Jake asked. Sam Cotter. He still making his rounds? Marshal Cotter? Tom nodded slowly. He's due through here end of the week. Man straight as they come. Then we get the evidence to him. Jake turned to Martha. It could work. Clear your name. Maybe even get the bounty off mine if we prove Waters was corrupt. That's a lot of ifs, Martha said. Yes, but the alternative is running for the rest of our lives. He took her hands. You said yes to marrying me. Let me fight for our future. Let me prove I can be more than just an outlaw. Tom coughed. Marrying? Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's none of your concern. Tom Garrett. A small smile crossed the deputy's face. No, ma'am, though I'd say congratulations, if it weren't such strange circumstances. You won't tell anyone? Martha asked. Tell them what? I came out here to warn a widow about harassment. Didn't see anybody else. Tom put his hat back on. But, Mr. McKenna, if you're serious about going after evidence, you'll need help. Waters keeps his private papers in the safe at his house. Man sleeps light and keeps a scattergun by the bed. You offering? Tom swallowed hard. My badge means something. Or it should, if Waters is corrupt. He nodded. Yes, I'm offering. Jake studied the young man. Why should I trust you? Because I'm here, warning you instead of leading that posse. Tom's jaw set. Because what's right is right, badge or no badge. They spent the next hour planning. Tom would create a distraction. Get Waters out of his house. Jake would slip in, crack the safe, a skill he'd unfortunately had cause to learn, and get the evidence. Martha would ready supplies in case they needed to run. As Tom prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Mrs. Sullivan. For what it's worth, I think my mother would have liked knowing you found someone. Even if he is, he glanced at Jake. Complicated. After he'd gone, Martha sank into a chair. This is really happening. Jake knelt beside her. We can still run. Take Tom's offer of the freight wagon. No. Martha's voice grew stronger. I'm tired of men like Waters taking what they want. If there's a chance to fight back, we take it. It's dangerous. So was saving your life that first night. She touched his face. I've made my choice. Jake, question is, are you sure about yours? This isn't your fight. It became mine the moment I fell in love with you. He turned his head to kiss her palm. Besides, I've been running for 20 years. Maybe it's time to stand and fight for something worth keeping. That evening, as they prepared for what might be their last night in the cabin, Martha found herself moving through memories. Her wedding dishes, carefully wrapped. James's tools, still sharp and oiled. The quilt her mother had made, faded now but still warm. We'll come back for them, Jake said, watching her. Will we? I swear it, one way or another. You'll have your home back. They ate a simple meal, both too tense for much appetite. As darkness fell, Jake checked his weapons, loaded extra ammunition. Martha packed essentials, food, water, medical supplies, just in case. I should go with you, she said. No, if something goes wrong, you need to be ready to run. Promise me, Martha, if I'm not back by dawn, you take that wagon west. Jake, promise me. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. I promise, she lied. They stood together at the door, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Jake pulled her close, kissing her with a desperation that made her knees weak. I'll come back, he whispered against her lips. I swear I'll come back to you. You better. We have a wedding to attend. He smiled at that, the expression transforming his face. Yes, we do. And then he was gone, melting into the darkness like the shadow he'd trained himself to be. Martha barred the door and took up her vigil at the window, rifle ready, heart racing. The night stretched endlessly. Every sound might be hoofbeats. Every shadow might be riders approaching. She thought about the life she'd built here, the life she might have to leave. But more than that, she thought about the life she could build with Jake, a future neither of them had dared dream of until now. As midnight passed, she heard it, commotion from the direction of town. Shouts carried on the wind, gunshots, distant but distinct. Martha gripped the rifle tighter, praying to a god she'd half forgotten. Come back to me, she whispered to the darkness. Come back, so we can start living. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. But Martha kept watch, a lone woman holding vigil for an outlaw who'd promised to return by sunrise, an outlaw who'd called her his bride and meant it, an outlaw she'd trust with her life, because he'd already trusted her with his. The gunfire from town had ceased an hour ago, leaving only an ominous silence that pressed against Martha's ears like cotton. She paced the cabin floor, wearing a path in the old boards, rifle clutched in white-knuckled hands. Every few minutes she checked the window, searching the pre-dawn darkness for any sign of movement. The eastern sky showed the faintest hint of gray when she finally saw them. 2 riders approaching fast, one slumped forward in the saddle. Martha's heart leaped to her throat as she recognized Jake's bay horse, with Tom Garrett riding alongside, one hand steadying Jake in the saddle. She flew out the door, reaching them as Tom reined in the horses. Jake was conscious but pale, his left arm hanging useless, blood soaking through his coat at the shoulder. "Ambush," Tom said tersely, helping Jake dismount. "Waters figured out our plan, had men waiting, but we got it." Jake gritted out as Martha supported him into the cabin. "The evidence. Tom has it." "Evidence can wait," Martha said, her hands already working at his coat. "You're hurt." The bullet had torn through the meat of his shoulder, missing bone but leaving ragged flesh in its wake. Martha worked with grim efficiency, cleaning and binding the wound while Tom kept watch at the window. "Waters?" she asked as she tied off the bandage. "Dead," Jake said flatly. "Tried to shoot me in the back. Tom stopped him." Martha looked at the young deputy, who stood rigid at the window. "Tom? I killed him," Tom said, his voice hollow. "My own sheriff. Shot him dead." "You saved my life," Jake corrected. "Man was corrupt as they come. Tom, you know that. Knowing and doing." Tom shook his head. "They'll hang me for this. Not when they see these." Jake gestured weakly to the saddlebags Tom had brought in. Waters kept records of everything. Every bribe, every forced land sale, every dirty deal with Hutchins and the others. Names, dates, amounts. Enough to hang half the town council. Martha finished with Jake's shoulder and moved to examine the papers. Her eyes widened as she read, This is unbelievable. He documented everything. Man liked to keep insurance." Jake said, "Never trusted his partners. We need to get these to Marshal Cotter." Tom said, "But Waters' men will be coming. They scattered when the shooting started, but they'll regroup," as if in response to his words. Dust appeared on the horizon, riders moving fast toward the cabin. "How many?" Jake struggled to rise, reaching for his gun with his good arm. Tom squinted through the window. 8, maybe 9. We can't hold them off." "The canyon," Martha said suddenly. "Devil's Canyon, 2 miles north, narrow passage, good cover. We could make a stand there." "You mean I could?" Jake said. "You two are getting out of here." "Like hell," Martha snapped. "We're in this together." Martha, "No." She loaded her rifle with practiced efficiency. "I'm not losing another person I love to this God-forsaken territory. We fight together or not at all." Jake stared at her, something fierce and tender warring in his eyes. "Stubborn woman. You knew that when you proposed." "Despite everything," he smiled. "That I did." They moved quickly, Tom helping Jake mount while Martha grabbed ammunition and the precious saddlebags of evidence. The riders were closer now, their shouts carrying on the morning wind. Devil's Canyon lived up to its name, a twisted gash in the earth, narrow enough that 2 horses could barely ride abreast. Ancient floods had carved hollows and overhangs in the red rock, creating natural defensive positions. Martha had discovered it years ago while searching for strays. They made it to the canyon mouth just as the first shots rang out. Tom's horse screamed and went down, sending the deputy rolling across the rocky ground. Martha wheeled back, firing from the saddle to give him cover as he scrambled up behind Jake. Into the canyon they plunged, hooves echoing off the walls like thunder. Martha led them to a widening where fallen boulders created a natural fortress. They dismounted, Jake grimacing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "They'll have to come at a single file," Martha said, positioning herself behind a boulder. "We can hold them." "For how long?" Tom checked his ammunition. "I've got maybe 20 rounds. 30 here," Jake said. "Plus Martha's rifle. It'll have to be enough," Martha said firmly. The first of Waters' men appeared at the canyon mouth. Martha's rifle cracked, and the man toppled from his saddle. The others pulled back, shouting curses. "Mrs. Sullivan," a voice called out. Martha recognized Bob Henley, the man who'd wanted to search her cabin days ago. "Send out McKenna and the deputy. This doesn't concern you." "Everything about this concerns me," Martha shouted back. "You're on the wrong side. Bob, Waters was corrupt. We have proof." "Don't matter now. He's dead, and someone's got to pay." Jake positioned himself at another gap in the rocks, favoring his wounded shoulder. "They'll try to flank us," he told Tom quietly. Watch the rim. For the next hour, they held the canyon. The attackers tried 3 rushes, each one driven back by careful shots. Jake, even wounded, was deadly accurate. Tom, still shaken by killing Waters, nonetheless stood firm, and Martha, defending her future with desperate determination, proved why frontier women were feared as much as any gunslinger. But their ammunition ran low with each exchange. Jake was down to his last cylinder. Tom had 6 shots left. Martha counted 8 cartridges remaining for the rifle. Next rush will probably do it, Jake said quietly. He looked at Martha, his face etched with pain and regret. I'm sorry. I brought this on you. No, Martha said fiercely. Waters brought this on us. Greed brought this on us. You brought me hope. Touching as this is, Tom interrupted. Riders coming. But these riders came from the north, from the direction of Laramie. And at their head rode a man with a federal marshal's star glinting in the morning sun. Marshal Sam Cotter was a lean, weathered man with eyes like flint and a reputation for absolute honesty. He took in the scene, the dead horses, the defensive positions, the men clustered at the canyon mouth, and his hand went to his weapon. Stand down, his voice boomed like judgment. All of you, weapons down. This is federal business now. Confusion reigned among Waters' men. Some recognized the marshal, knew his reputation. Others looked uncertain, caught between finishing their vendetta and facing federal authority. Marshal, Bob Henley called out. We're pursuing fugitives. The outlaw, Jake McKenna, and I know who Jake McKenna is. Cotter interrupted. Question is, do you know who you're riding with? Some of these men are wanted in 3 territories. Curious company for a law-abiding posse. Martha emerged from cover, keeping her rifle visible but lowered. Marshal Cotter, we have evidence of corruption. Sheriff Waters was, Ma'am, I'll need you to put that weapon down and come out slow. All of you. It was the longest walk of Martha's life, emerging from the canyon's protection. Jake leaned heavily on her, his face gray with pain and blood loss. Tom came last, the saddlebags of evidence clutched in his hands. Cotter studied them with sharp eyes. Tom Garrett, heard you killed Sheriff Waters. Yes, sir, Tom said steadily. He was drawing on Mr. McKenna from behind. I had no choice. And you, McKenna. The marshal's gaze was cold. $5,000 bounty on your head. Yes, sir, Jake said simply. Mrs. Sullivan. Cotter's voice gentled slightly. You want to explain how you come to be in such interesting company? Martha lifted her chin. Mr. McKenna was wounded. I gave him shelter. When we discovered Sheriff Waters' corruption, we tried to expose it. These men attacked us for it. That's so. Cotter looked at the saddlebags Tom held. This evidence you mentioned? Yes, sir. Tom stepped forward. Names, dates, amounts. Shows Waters was taking bribes, forcing people off their land, working with the banker Hutchins to... I'll examine it. Cotter interrupted. He turned to Waters' men. You boys have one chance, right away now, and I might forget I saw some familiar faces. Stay, and I'll be checking every wanted poster from here to California. The men exchanged glances. Without Waters to lead them, faced with a federal marshal and his deputies, their courage evaporated. One by one, they wheeled their horses and rode away. Now then, Cotter said, turning back to the 3, let's see this evidence. The next hour passed in a blur. Cotter examined the papers with growing incredulity and anger. The corruption went deeper than even Martha had realized. Judges, councilmen, even a territorial senator. This is considerable, Cotter said finally. Tom, you're cleared in Waters' death. Self-defense in pursuit of duty. He looked at Jake. You're a different problem. Martha's heart sank, but Jake nodded. I understand. Do you? Cotter studied him. Man with your reputation? Settling down, exposing corruption, defending a widow's land rights. Some might call that redemption. Some might, Jake agreed carefully. I'll need to take you in. There's procedures. Paperwork. Cotter paused. Might take some time to sort through. Might be some of those old warrants have problems. Wrong dates. Unclear jurisdiction. Might take months to sort out. Hope flickered in Martha's chest. Marshal? Ma'am, I can't ignore the law, but I can ensure it's applied fairly and thoroughly. He looked at Jake. You'll post bond. Of course. Someone will have to vouch for you. Ensure you appear when called. I'll vouch for him, Martha said immediately. Me too, Tom added. Cotter nodded slowly. Well then, seems Mr. McKenna has found himself some respectable citizens willing to stand for him. That counts for something. As they prepared to return to town, Jake pulled Martha aside. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes were clear. This isn't the fresh start I promised you, he said quietly. It's a start, Martha corrected. We'll face whatever comes together. Could be prison, could be hanging, could be freedom, Martha countered. Could be that future we talked about. Jake touched her face with his good hand. How did I find you, Martha Sullivan? You didn't, she said softly. I found you, bleeding on my doorstep, and I'll keep finding you, no matter what comes. He kissed her then, there in the morning sun with federal marshals and the smell of gunpowder all around. Kissed her like a promise, like a vow, like a man who'd found something worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Marshal Cotter cleared his throat. Whenever you're ready, folks. Justice waits for no man, or woman. As they rode back toward town, Martha felt the weight of uncertainty. There would be trials, investigations, the slow grinding of territorial law. But Jake rode beside her, wounded but unbowed. Tom rode with them, a young man who'd chosen justice over corruption. And in her saddlebags, next to the evidence that would reshape the county, lay something else, the deed to her land, safe and secure. Whatever came next, she'd fought for her home and won. She'd fought for love and found it. The sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of night, and Martha Sullivan rode toward an uncertain future with the certain knowledge that she'd never face it alone again. Winter came early to Wyoming territory that year, blanketing the land in pristine white that hid the scars of violence beneath its peaceful surface. Martha stood at her cabin window, watching fat snowflakes drift past, a cup of coffee warming her hands. So much had changed since that fateful October night when a wounded outlaw had collapsed at her door. The trials had taken 3 months. Jake had spent them under house arrest at Martha's cabin, Marshal Cotter deeming her homestead secure enough and her vouching sufficient. Those months had been their courtship, a strange one, with Jake wearing an ankle shackle and deputies checking in twice a week, but a courtship nonetheless. They'd talked through long winter nights, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. Jake had proven handy despite his healing shoulder, fixing things James had never gotten to, the loose boards in the barn, the stubborn pump handle, the drafty windows. He'd taught her to play poker by lamplight and lost gracefully when she proved naturally gifted at reading his tells. Wool gathering again? Jake's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Remembering, Martha corrected, leaning into his warmth. Good memories, I hope. She turned in his arms, studying the face she'd come to know so well. The scar from temple to jaw that had once seemed menacing now was just part of him, like the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how he still favored his left shoulder on cold mornings. The best, she said, reaching up to touch that scar. Tom should be here soon. As if summoned. Hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Tom Garrett, now wearing a sheriff's star. The town had elected him after the corruption trials, dismounted and stomped snow from his boots before entering. Coffee's hot, Martha said by way of greeting. Bless you. Tom wrapped his hands around the cup gratefully. Cold enough to freeze the tail off a brass monkey out there. Any word from Cotter? Jake asked, though his casual tone didn't quite hide his tension. Tom grinned. Matter of fact, yes, telegraph came this morning. He pulled a paper from his coat. Seems the territorial governor reviewed your case. In light of your significant assistance in rooting out corruption and demonstrated reform of character, he's issued a full pardon. The paper slipped from Jake's suddenly nerveless fingers. What? You're a free man, Jake. No bounty, no warrants, clean slate. Martha felt tears prick her eyes as Jake sank into a chair, his face a study in disbelief. For a man who'd spent 20 years looking over his shoulder, freedom was an almost incomprehensible gift. Furthermore, Tom continued, there's a reward for the recovery of the stolen mine payroll. $3,000. Cotter figured since you led us to where Torres hid it, you're entitled. I don't want blood money, Jake said automatically. It's not blood money, Martha said firmly. It's a future. Our future. Jake looked at her, and she saw the moment he truly understood. No more running, no more fear. Just the life they dared to dream about. There's more, Tom said, trying to hide a smile. That traveling preacher, Reverend Mills, he'll be at Miller's Ranch tomorrow. Still planning on needing his services? Jake stood slowly, crossed to Martha, and took her hands. Martha Sullivan, you've already saved my life more times than I can count. Will you save it once more by marrying this reformed outlaw? I said yes before, Martha reminded him, tears flowing freely now. That hasn't changed. Even though I'm no longer dangerous and exciting, just a regular man now? Martha laughed through her tears. Jake McKenna, you'll never be just a regular man. The wedding was small. Tom stood as Jake's witness, while Mrs. Thornton, the neighbor Martha had once claimed was coming to help, served as hers. The woman had been delighted to learn her fictional assistants had played a part in the dramatic events. Reverend Mills, well-versed in frontier weddings, kept the ceremony simple. But when Jake promised to protect and cherish Martha for all his days, his voice carried the weight of a man who understood exactly what those words meant. And when Martha vowed to stand by him in good times and bad, she spoke with the certainty of someone who'd already proven it. By the power vested in me, Reverend Mills intoned, I pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. McKenna, you may kiss your bride. Jake cupped Martha's face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. She spared the Raider's life at midnight, he murmured, for her ears alone. By sunrise, he called her his bride, and now, at last, it's true. Their kiss was sweet and full of promise, tasting of new beginnings and hard-won happiness. The small gathering shared a meal at Miller's Ranch, toasting the newlyweds with good whiskey and better wishes. As evening approached, Jake and Martha made their farewells and headed home. Home to their cabin, their land, their life together. The ride back was quiet, comfortable. Martha rode beside her husband, through countryside transformed by snow into something magical. When they crested the last rise and saw the cabin below, smoke rising from the chimney Tom had kept stoked in their absence, Martha felt her heart swell. No regrets? Jake asked softly. Not one, Martha assured him. You? Only that it took so long to find you. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming. Jake had made changes during his confinement, new shelves for Martha's preserves, a rocking chair by the fire he'd built with his own hands, signs of a man making a nest, creating a home. As they prepared for bed, their first as husband and wife, Martha found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from that desperate night when mercy had overcome sense, through violence and trials, to this moment of peace. What are you thinking? Jake asked, brushing her hair as she sat before the small mirror. About Johnny, Martha said honestly, wondering if he'd be proud of the man you became. Jake's hand stilled. I hope so. I think he'd be happy I found you. He always said I needed someone to make me smile more. A wise child. He was. Jake resumed brushing, his touch gentle. What do you think James would say? Martha considered. I think he'd be glad I'm not alone. He was a practical man. He'd approve of having someone to help with the heavy work. They both laughed at that. The ghosts of their pasts somehow blessed and released in the moment. That night, as snow continued to fall softly outside. They began their life together in truth, not as widow and outlaw, but as husband and wife, building something new from the ashes of their former selves. Spring brought new challenges and joys. With the reward money and what Jake had saved from his outlaw years, honestly earned funds he'd hidden away, he insisted they bought the neighboring homestead, doubling their land. Jake proved to have a gift with horses, and soon Sullivan Ranch was known for quality mounts. Tom visited regularly, sometimes bringing his new bride, the schoolteacher from Cedar Ridge. The four of them would share Sunday dinners, playing cards and sharing gossip, a strange family forged from unlikely circumstances. On a warm May evening, Martha stood once again at her window, but this time she wasn't alone. Jake's arms encircled her, his hands resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly where new life grew. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Martha replied. "Even though you married an outlaw?" "Especially because I married an outlaw," Martha corrected. "Though I prefer to think I married a man who chose love over fear, redemption over running." "Poetic woman," Jake teased, but his voice was thick with emotion. "Practical woman," Martha countered. "I saw a good man who needed saving and decided to keep him." As sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, they stood together watching their land, their home, settle into peaceful evening. The grave on the hill stood witness to the past, but no longer held her prisoner. The future stretched before them, bright with promise. Martha thought about the woman she'd been, alone, barely surviving, existing rather than living. That woman had made a choice one desperate midnight that changed everything. She'd shown mercy to a stranger and found love. She'd risked everything and gained a life worth living. "Thank you," Jake whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me, for giving me a chance at this." His hands tightened over their growing child. "For our future." Martha turned in his arms, reaching up to frame his face. "Thank you for being worth saving." They kissed as the first stars appeared, two souls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk together into the light. Outside, the vast Wyoming sky stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. Inside, love had transformed a lonely cabin into a home, and somewhere, perhaps, an 8-year-old boy named Johnny smiled to see his brother finally at peace, finally home, finally loved as he deserved to be. The raider had been spared at midnight. By sunrise, he'd claimed his bride, and in all the sunrises since, they'd built a life together, not perfect, but real and true and theirs. In the end, that was the greatest treasure of all. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Martha and Jake's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Where are you listening from today? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of romance, redemption, and adventure from the American frontier. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Martha's decision that fateful midnight. Would you have opened your door? Share your feelings in the comments. And until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the wildest of hearts.